I'm delighted to catch up with Kathleen Dudley again, our Mora County activist for truth and justice. And we're going to get an update from Kathleen on her fight in the court, her judicial adventures, and the new game in town seems to be the bonds, going after the bonds. And I think this is going to be a winning strategy. It seems to be taking hold all over the country, and I've just heard around the world. So sit back and enjoy. We're going to get a great education from Kathleen. Welcome, Kathleen.
Well, thank you, Mahara. It's always a pleasure, and your work is so necessary. We are very fortunate, and so thank you very much for all you do to make this happen.
You're welcome. I enjoy the, well, you know, we're in it for a reason. We're fight for truth and justice. So here we are.
That is true. Well, I just wanted to give a little update on what is going on in the 4th Judicial District, because as I told you before, there's been a conflict of interest in the court cases in which I'm involved. Now, my entire presentation is as a sui juris, so I am representing myself in my own jurisdiction of constitutionally secured rights. And that is very different from what the courts represent. They represent maritime law, but I refuse that jurisdiction. And all of my pleadings, all of my cases, I come to them, not accepting their jurisdiction and demanding my own jurisdiction. So an update on the case with Michael Aragon is that during a hearing on January 31st, he out of the blue, wasn't even on the docket, declared that he had recused himself from the second case, not the one in this hearing, but from the other case. And I found that most interesting. It was like a child who was so excited they had to share what was there, because he had been on the other case for 4 months and had not recused himself. So that was very good, because he'd been perjuring his oath. And so a new judge was assigned, and that was Flora Gallegos. And before I could get my letter of objection to her being put on that case, because she had a conflict of interest, she recused herself. And then the next judge, there are 3 judges in the 4th Judicial Court, was Abigail Aragon. And again,
the sister of Michael.
Of Michael Aragon, obviously a conflict of interest. Before I could get my letter of my pleading to the court, she recused herself. So there we have 3 judges out of 3 recusing themselves on a case. Now, this was obviously a direct reflection of the power of the Constitution when we hold the officials to their oaths to uphold this Constitution and put that court into its lawful jurisdiction, which is the Constitution. And so that was a very exciting circumstance. Now, the quote from the New Mexico Judiciary website, which we talked about last week, was that the mission of the New Mexico Judiciary is to protect the rights and liberties of the people of New Mexico, guaranteed by the Constitution and the laws of the state of New Mexico and the United States. And so by holding these judges to the Constitution, we ensure as much as we can that we are given due process. And that was a very significant win in my eyes. So now I have requested that we change venue, which will have to go to a completely different district. And I'm requesting a constitutionally sound court, which I'm not so certain they exist. But so it was interesting that since I'm demanding this constitutionally secured court, because I'm doing that because the Fourth Judicial District Court is unable to claim jurisdiction over my constitutionally secured jurisdiction. And Aragon and Gallegos both perjured their oaths and violated the 3rd and 4th sections of the 14th Amendment, thereby vacating their offices and forfeiting all benefits, including salaries and pensions. Now, this is a serious crime, and it's up to us to hold them to this. But up until now, well, 25 years ago, Margie and Jack Flynn were holding their feet to the fire. But for 25 years, no one has done this in the courts. So they have been getting away, quite frankly, with the thievery and thuggery. So here we are, including the bond issue. We are going after these folks and saying, look, we are sovereign people. We're holding you to our constitutionally secured rights. So it's actually a very exciting time.
Wow, Kathleen, that's great news. Because last time I talked to you, you were wondering what on earth was going to happen next. You were feeling a little beat up, and so now they've all recused themselves. This is significant. Yes, absolutely. Yes. So let's move on to the issue of bonds and the requirement for publicly elected officials to hold a bond under the Constitution. Tell us about what you are doing with that and what's going on generally in the state that you know of. So,
okay, well, I don't know how many people know what a surety bond is, so I'm going to just read a little bit about that. A surety bond is a written agreement providing for monetary compensation to be paid by the surety company should there be a failure by the person bonded to perform specific acts within a stated period. So every single elected official or appointed official to any office, whether it's a judge, a superintendent of a school, the governor, the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, all must have surety bonds. And in fact, that is by the New Mexico Constitution. So I'm going to share a reference. There is an unmasked website, and on that is a link for surety bonds, New Mexico surety bonds, and it's a memorandum that gives us tremendous depth of information, and I recommend that everybody go to that site, and I can share that with you so that they have access in this video. But it is a wealth of information, and I thank the folks who put it together. It's helped us tremendously.
We'll put that, I'll put the link under the video, and just so people know, they're always with Cat Chats under the videos are links to further information and supportive information.
Okay, great. So every one of these people, these officials that are part of the state, of the government, must take an oath to uphold the Constitution of New Mexico and the Constitution of the United States of America. That is part of the requirement for them to hold office. And as I mentioned, both Abigail Aragon and Flora Gallegos and Michael Aragon perjured their oath. They violated their oath. And so you must take an oath to uphold the constitutions, because that's a condition to hold office. And constitutionally, when we are in court or going after surety bonds, we hold them to the Constitution, because those are our secured rights. And that gives us tremendous support, because we are sovereign people and we are born to not be under the government of anyone. And so all of these governments that are acting today are attempting to create a master-slave situation and put us under their authority. But in fact, they're under us. We, the people, are the government. And most people just don't quite understand that. So,
well, it's that we haven't been taught it. I mean, but that's in the schools, it's not taught, and basically in the schools now you're taught to do what you're told. So, and these people in public office now, they don't take these oaths seriously. I don't believe they do their oath thing, and but they don't take it seriously.
well, they
I think
perjure
they've been
them.
used to operating in the dark, and they're not used to we the people shining a light on what they're up to. So
That is correct. And they're not used to having their feet held to the fire. So when they take that oath to hold that office, they also must file a surety bond with the Secretary of State. Now, I'm not going to quote specifically from the constitutional references. People can go to this website and get all of the specific data verbatim, but I'm going to give that more in a general sense. So they must do that within 30 days of taking office. Now, without this, without the oath and the surety bond and filing it with the Secretary of State, they're committing fraud upon the people, and they're in violation of the New Mexico Constitution. So both of those things are required for holding any office of the offices that I've mentioned, as judge, as superintendent, as governor. So when a court, for example, has no jurisdiction, because if these folks are acting in fraud, there's no jurisdiction. That means that that they have no authority. They have no capacity to make any rulings, any orders. Anything that they do is null and void. So what we have been finding out is that these de facto judges, and I'm going to speak specifically about the judges, that they actually don't have the authority that we've given them. And that in and of itself is a phenomenal awareness for everyone to understand. In other words, all the judicial systems all across New Mexico are de facto, and they are acting in fraud, and they have no jurisdiction over us. So when we take our position of standing in our constitutionally secured rights, refusing their jurisdiction, we continue to claim that and expose them to their fraud. Now, what led to understanding all of this was by sending an IPRA, an inspection of public records, to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State sent back a response stating that they have scoured their own documents and they do not find record. And I'll read this. After a diligent search, we have determined we are not in custody of any records responsive to your request. Now, I was asking for the judges of the 4th Judicial District Court, their surety bonds. It is our understanding that surety bond coverage is provided to all New Mexico officers and employers by the General Services Department, which is risk management. And so there's two big ones in this. State employees and officers are not required, or in most cases, not even allowed to obtain individual surety bonds. That's an outright lie. So not only was there a Surety Bond Act that was passed by the state legislature. Number one, it was passed without a referendum taken to the people of New Mexico. In other words, no change to the Constitution of the United States of America or the national Constitution can be
You
done.
mean more the New Mexico Constitution?
Yes, neither the New Mexico Constitution nor the national Constitution can be modified without a referendum. And 2/3 of the people have to vote in approval of that referendum. That Surety Bond Act that was voted on by the legislature in New Mexico was never brought as a referendum to the people. So that was all done in fraud. Now, people need to listen
So
to.
how, do you have any idea how long ago that was done? Is that recent? Is it, was it a while back? I mean, did they sneak it in with another bill or something the way they like to do and just put a change in there? Do you have an idea how it was done?
That I don't know yet. I have to look into that, and I will, and I'll let you know. That's a most interesting question. But what we know is that it was done unlawfully, fraudulently. It was done at a time when apparently the citizens of New Mexico weren't watching. And so we can be lulled, we can be snowballed, snowed. I mean, it's not easy because so many tricks are being used. But what that means is that with this response from Maggie Toulouse Oliver's paralegal and records custodian, Patrick Rostock.
She being the Secretary of State, just to clarify for people, because.
Yes, the Secretary of State is saying that they are no longer upholding their oath to hold the surety bonds for all elected officials that are required for them to hold office. They're no longer holding that at the Secretary of State's office. And what they have done is they have decided on their own or with multiples to move that out of her purview, even though the New Mexico State Constitution mandates it be under the Secretary of State's purview. And they've moved it to the General Services Division or Risk Management, which is nothing more than a private corporation doing business. But what we found out last week is that that's what the court systems are today, right? They're all listed on Dun & Bradstreet. They're all private corporations or companies doing business for profit. And that we're exposing as well. Those are big.
Wow, it is big. And we've been asleep in New Mexico particularly. New Mexicans have generally, the way I see it, just many of them, particularly in the Hispanic culture up to now, have felt that there's nothing they could do anyway. They've been taught to feel powerless. And because there's been such a hold over politics, over the political, certain families in the state have that game wrapped up, is what I'm seeing. And so everybody else just goes, well, we just kind of go along to get along. And that's how we got to this mess.
Well, it is. And so, as you know, there's a very good group of folks called New Mexicans Against Tyranny on Telegram. And I urge people to sign up and become active, because it's our action, it's acting together that will make a difference. It's not about sitting back. It's not about doing a click here or there on your computer screen, but it's action. So there are a few things to be done. But regarding the surety bonds, I received a copy of a response to General Services Division, so the risk management And they supplied me with a document at my IPRA request that showed that they have an umbrella or a blanket bond. And they also do indicate that they have some surety bonds for the people that are, in office. But the fact of the matter is, whether they supply a response or not, it is critical that we hold the Secretary of State to her constitutional mandate and to our constitutionally secured rights. And that is for the Secretary of State to hold these surety bonds and for a citizen to be able to write an IPRA request and receive a copy. Because when an elected official or a school board administrator or whomever it is in violation of their very position as that official, we have the right to pull that surety bond and to challenge that. And the more people that do, the bigger the consequence. So we're being refused access to that. So we must put the pressure on the Secretary of State. Now, I sent a complaint to the Attorney General's office showing the responses from the Records Division of the 4th Judicial District Court, and also from the Secretary of State, and demanding an investigation into this crime because they are violating our very rights and violating the Constitution. So when one voice does it, if you can imagine the power of 10 or 20 or 30, because behind everyone who takes action, there are hundreds of people who are thinking the same thing but might not act, and they know that. So our power does come with multiple people stepping up.
Yes, so I want to make one thing, I want to clarify something here. From what I understand, if they have a personal bond as laid out in the Constitution, in the New Mexico Constitution, and they violate that Constitution, then we, the people, can pull that bond. They are personally liable, personally. With the bonds that they have now, this umbrella bond, what I get is that we are going to pay that bond.
That's right.
They're no longer personally liable. And we, the taxpayers, pay that bond. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding as well, Mahara. And so that sham has
very
been
clever, very clever.
Very clever.
Clever
It has
living,
been done right beneath our noses.
Yeah. So my question is, if they don't have this personal bond, how do we hold them accountable?
Well, if they don't have that personal bond, they cannot hold office. They must be removed from office. And any ruling, any pleading, any order from a judge's perspective is null and void. So we must take the next step, and we must involve, as I've said, the Attorney General. We can involve the Secretary of State and let them know what we know, which is what we are doing right now by filing all these IPRAs and then follow-ups. And then we can take it to the FBI. We can take it, we can continue to take it to higher and higher levels. But this kind of fraud has not been exposed and acted upon. And today with, as you know, with the basic declaration that the Secretary of State from them no longer holds these surety bonds, and that they are not, according to risk management, even having to hold an individual surety bond, then it's time for us to really take some deep action. The other thing we can do, we can begin to write affidavits. We write an affidavit, which is a statement of truth, fact, and law. And I have one that I have put together right now for the Secretary of State, exposing her violations. And then I am going to be getting that notarized, and I will then be sending it to her registered mail. So I'm happy to share that template. The important thing about an affidavit is it must be in our own writing, our own truth, but then they can use various references to all of the constitutional demands upon the Secretary of State. But again, if we have an influx, an outpouring of affidavits against the Secretary of State for her violation of not holding these surety bonds for all these elected officials, then we put tremendous lawful pressure upon her, because an affidavit of truth cannot be rebutted. Therefore, it stands as law in the courts. And I think we're going to the courts with this.
But the irony of it all is that we go to the courts with it, but the courts are all involved in the game.
Well,
So,
that is true. And but you know, it's very interesting. So there I am in this court system of 4th Judicial District Court, with the judges all perjuring their oaths, and right, left, and center, and declaring, their rulings, their judgments. And I am saying, but my constitutionally secured rights give me the right to stand here and present my argument. And by not paying heed to my argument, they're violating due process of law. So many years ago, when I was working on the fracking issue, I spoke with Larry Yates from New York, and he was the main representative for Love Canal and Lois Gibbs, where a contractor had created a development on a landfill area, and all these children over time were developing cancers because of all the carcinogens oozing up from the soil. And what I remember so clearly, I don't know, 17 years ago now, he said, the person who stands in the ring the longest wins. And isn't that what we're doing? We're standing in the ring the longest, because Thomas Jefferson said every generation we must have a revolution, otherwise government becomes too large. And so when we give up our rights and give our power over to a group of people whose propensity is to continue to take from us, and as we're seeing, create fraud, then we must stand in the ring and invest. And if we're willing to fight for our freedom, wow, so this is a long haul, and we all stand up for our freedom and we don't leave the ring.
so true, Kathleen. Beautifully put. So where can someone go right now and to the website, the UNMAS website, to get the steps on how to file these IPRAs?
Well, actually, I would recommend going to the Telegram, joining on Telegram, and go to New Mexicans Against Tyranny. There's a tremendous amount of direction by the folks there, and I can give you the link for the Unmasked to go directly to the memorandum on New Mexico surety bonds. So they can read through that and they can begin to really absorb the trickery that's gone on. But the most important thing that we must hold on to is that constitutionally, we have secured rights and that we must push our constitutionally secured rights. We must hold that jurisdiction and not be sidetracked by general, by general services division or risk management or all these other fraudulent corporations that are perpetuating lies, because they're taking on work and pulling us down to a rabbit hole that takes us further away from our constitutionally secured rights. So we must keep putting the pressure on the Secretary of State. We must keep filing complaints with the Attorney General. That's where our power lies. And then, of course, with our affidavits.
So it's a numbers game. We got to get involved. We got to jump in and just do it, right?
Well,
But once you've done it once, then you realize it's a game, it can be fun. It's a fight. We're in it together. So I just encourage everyone to look at these websites, jump on that Telegram, New Mexicans Against Tyranny, and let's start just fighting together, fighting for truth and fighting for justice and fighting to get our Constitution back, our God-given rights, which no man can take away, no government. We give our leaders that right. And if they're not performing the way we have asked, then we take it away from them. They don't get to take rights away from us. That's the bottom line.
That's right. That's what standing in sovereignty is about. That's what we're born sovereign. And if someone says to you, you don't have the right to leave the state, or you don't have the right to bear arms, you look at them and you say, and who are you, sir? I am a sovereign man, or I am a sovereign woman. You have no jurisdiction over me. And in fact, I pay your salary. This is the kind of chutzpah, or the kind of, it's not the right word, but this is the kind of bravado that we must bring forward today, because it is truly that black and white.
Yeah, if we don't, then I wouldn't even want to contemplate what happens next. So we will. And thank you, Kathleen, for being a leader, for stepping up. It's people like you that inspire other people. So thank you so much for joining me today. Any last word? We're out of time once again.
I guess I'm just wanting to reiterate that, it takes, as you've said, all of us working together. And I'm learning from the hard work that has come from the many behind me, and those who are working diligently today, including yourself. This is real time, and we will be victorious. Thank you, Mahara.
Thank you, Kathleen.